I'd like to welcome everyone to the final council meeting for the Provo Municipal Council and Redevelopment Agency. It is Tuesday, December 10th, 2019 at 6:05 p.m. and we are in the City Center Municipal Council Chambers at 351 West Center Street, Provo, Utah. This meeting is being broadcast live on the web on the Provo City Council YouTube channel, where it will also be available for on-demand viewing. I'd like to make a special note to my fellow councilors and mayor that due to some technical difficulties, these microphones are going to be hot all night long, so just because you press the button, it'll still be live and broadcasting, so be aware of that. And then also, I guess, another public service announcement. Thank you for all that came for the open house farewell, and I've been told there's more food out there, and so we encourage everyone to grab a plate on your way out as well and share the joy. The council requests that attendees help maintain the decorum of the meeting by silencing electronic devices, being respectful to others, and refraining from applause or other outbursts during the proceedings of the meeting. And we will begin with a roll call. Mr. Strachan?
Cliff Strachan.
Brian Jones.
Dave Sewell.
Gary Winterton.
George Stewart.
David Harding.
Kay Van Buren.
Dave Knecht.
George Handley.
Mayor Kafusi.
Thank you. Our opening prayer will be given by Dan Follett, after which Dave Mortensen will be leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Our Father, which art in heaven, we are thankful for the opportunity that we have to live in this country and for the freedoms that we enjoy and the opportunity that we have to assemble this evening and discuss topics related to the city of Provo. We're especially grateful this day for all of those who serve and contribute to the city of Provo and for the elected officials that dedicate so much of their time to the city. We ask that thy spirit might be with us, that we may make wise and good decisions this evening, and that we may have good discussions. And these things we pray for in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Will everyone please rise and repeat after me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mortensen. Mr. Follett? First item of business is the approval of minutes for September 10th, 2019, November 12th, and November 12th, 2019. Are there any requested changes to these minutes? All right. If there are no objections, I declare the minutes approved by unanimous consent. Mr. Jones, seems a little different order than we normally do, but we will now move to public comment portion of the meeting, and if you'll give us the preamble.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to. As indicated on the screen, a required public hearing will be held for certain agenda items prior to council action. After each such item has been presented, time to comment will be provided for all those who wish to speak. For items that do not require a public hearing, public comment will still be taken following presentation of the item, but will be limited to 10 minutes. At this time, 15 minutes have been set aside for an open public comment period, which is intended to allow comment on matters that do not appear on the agenda. Persons who speak during this time to an item that is on the agenda will not normally be afforded a second opportunity to speak during the comment period specific to that item. During any public comment period, each speaker will generally be limited to 2 minutes. Additional time may be given to individuals specifically invited to speak, such as applicants, neighborhood chairs, or others that may be representing additional persons. Please begin your comments by stating your name and city of residence. Due to noticing requirements, no formal action will be taken in this meeting on matters that do not appear on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Those with comments are invited to approach the podium.
Good evening, Mayor Kafusi, excuse me, and council members. I'm Kay Nelson. I'm from the Edgemont area in Northeast Provo, and I'm a member of the group called Proactive Provo. We've presented information to you several times since about last June. We want to thank you for all of your help, support, and guidance that you've given us, and several neighborhood chairs who are here tonight join with us in thanking you. We're very grateful for the guidance that you've given us, and thank you for listening to our concerns about protecting the foothills and the green spaces of Provo. We're glad that this is important to so many of you. Thank you to those who are stepping down from your council seats. We're grateful for your service, and we welcome new council members who have great visions for Provo. So we're excited to work with them. You might have heard that Proactive Provo had more than 150 people at last week's Planning Commission meeting. This was a unified show of interest where many neighbors in the Northeast area want a voice in what will happen in and to that area. There are many more than 150. We are gathering names, emails, and cell numbers so that we can inform and educate, but also gather opinions. We will give you and the new council members the data that we gather so that you can hear those voices. We want a neighborhood plan to be created for the Northeast area before any approval is given on any kind of development. We know that there is a foothill protection committee already in place, already working on protecting the foothills in that area. We're glad that there is interest from those in city positions to create a neighborhood plan for the Northeast area. This is a pivotal time in Provo's history. Decisions made in the next weeks or months could literally change the face of what Provo looks like for the rest of time. Growth will happen, and developments and housing must take place in Provo. People want to live here. It's such a great place to live. We're for development, but let's be wise and balance any developments with the need for preservation, easements, and conservancies for the aesthetic beauty and the value of being good stewards of this earth. We will not regret doing so. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson.
My name is Jay Goodliff, and I am a resident of Edgemont neighborhood. I'm here to talk about the sale of Tim Kiwanis Park. When you look at the various actions that took place before the sale of Tim Kiwanis Park, information withheld from the neighborhood, changing the agenda, not doing what you said you would do, there are really only two possibilities. Either these actions were mistakes or they were intentional. When these actions took place just before you voted to sell the park, my first guess would have been that these were mistakes. After all, this was the first time Provo City government was going through this process. Perhaps sufficient contingency plans were not in place to handle different dates of the federal government approval. But your statements and your actions did not reflect that mistakes were made. For example, the Parks and Recreations Director was given additional responsibilities. The property manager is referred to as a miracle worker. The logical conclusion from your actions and your statements, is that the shifting process was intentional, which would show a lack of integrity. When our neighborhood pointed this out in the meeting, again, pointing out not a possible conclusion, but the only logical conclusion, the mayor lectured us on what constituted corruption, as if the only public comments you welcome are comments that praise such shifting actions on the process. I tell my children that when they make a mistake, they should apologize. But it is even more important that public officials apologize, unless they want citizens to think that their mistaken actions are intentional. I watched that city council meeting as soon as I could, and I reread the minutes last night. The only apology the neighborhood received was, quote, "No one has guaranteed you a park across the street. I am sorry," unquote. Does that sound like the actions shifting the process were mistakes or intentional? Did we really deserve a lecture for making the logical conclusion from your actions and your statements? I was disappointed in your decision to sell the park, but I lose political decisions all the time. I was much more disappointed to see how the process unfolded at the end. It is a great disappointment to lose faith in local government. I hope that you do better in the future. Thank you for the opportunity to share my comments, and my congratulations on your retirements, and I hope that you have a great future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goodliff. Any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment period, and we will move to Mr. Sewell.
Mr. Chair, I just had a comment that seemed like it might be appropriate right at the end of public comment and before we go to the presentation. A recognition of our outgoing counselors. I just wanted to share that I coincidentally received an email from Sue Curtis, who was aware of what was happening tonight in the recognition, and I just wanted to pass on what she said. She said that she is so sad that she and John are in D.C. and will miss the reception of these wonderful outgoing council members. So just wanted to pass that on.
Thank you, Mr. Sewell. So the first presentation is a presentation in recognition of outgoing Councilors Knecht, Stewart, Van Buren, and Winterton. And this will be presented by our Council Executive Director.
Council members, it's my mixed feelings I have about watching these 4 council members retire from their service to the council. They've done some tremendous work. With your liberty, I'm going to flip this around and address the public, if that's all right with you. All right. So we have some awards for our council members as thank yous for their service. Before I do, behind these many elected officials, and you see them up here, stand the unsung heroes, the not-so-public servants. These are the spouses of our elected officials. They put up with many nights and days of missing companions as they're out serving in the public, and we appreciate them. They support, sustain, counsel, and care for our counselors. And would you just please join me in thanking Cynthia Van Buren, Vicki Winterton, Vicki Knecht, and Joanna Stewart, whose husbands are completing their terms on council, and Julia Harding, Amy Handley, Susan Sewell, and Steve Kafusi, whose partners are still in the middle of their terms of office. We want to thank you for your patience and support. We're grateful for the time we get to spend with your spouses. I'd like to ask Dave Harding and Kay Van Buren to come down first, please. So every year, we give a little gift to the chair and vice chair of the council, and often we do that at the first meeting of the next year, but since one of our council members is retiring, he won't be here. We assume he won't be here at the first meeting in January, but we wanted to thank him, and the gift... I don't think so. You're welcome anytime. And so what we've got for them is they chose to have a framed picture of the leadership team. Thank you for your service. Okay, you need to stay down here. Thanks. Okay. We get it. So Kay Van Buren represented District 4 since 2011. That's 8 years. He was elected in 2011 and re-elected in 2015. Kay has a background in business and in the home building industry. Kay served in the neighborhood program for many years and has been involved in city issues most of his adult life. Kay has a business management degree from BYU and is a lifelong resident of Provo. Kay is a member of the Utah Valley Home Builders Association, has been a contractor, builder, and developer for over 30 years. And he's shared that perspective so many times on council, and it's been helpful and educational to the rest of us. Kay and his wife Cynthia have 5 children. And we wanted to give you a plaque in honor of your service. Some of you may have seen this out there earlier. Okay. Gets to have two. And Kay, now we want you to have an opportunity to address the community for a couple minutes if you'd like.
As many of you who come to these meetings regularly know, I don't speak a lot, so it'll be very short. You notice the picture of the four men up there. Notice the color of their hair. I think mine was almost that color when I started, but some of the others, it's a number of us are leaving who are older, and it's been good serving with them. I will turn 69 next Monday. Now, 69 years ago, I was born right here in Utah Valley Hospital, and I've been here the whole time, except for a couple years. So Provo has been my home. That's just me, is Provo. I have not lived any other place. And so it's been great to serve and feel like you can try and contribute and make a difference in the city that you love. The Provo's a wonderful city. It's a special city. It's not many cities in our country that like Provo. And it's because of the people. They're special, good people in Provo. And it's been really good to be able to represent some and serve with others and get to know many other people. The thing I'll miss when I leave the council tonight is I'll miss the people. The reception we had was nice to be able to just say thank you to so many good people who work here and serve here every day to make this city what it is. And the council kind of comes and goes, but a lot of you out there are the ones that continue to make this city day in and day out the place that we want to be. So thank you for your effort to make the city so wonderful. Thanks for those I've served with on the council staff, Cliff, and all of the others. It's been a great experience, and I'll miss most of it. Some of these Tuesday night meetings I won't miss every Tuesday. I'm not going to say that, but it has been great. So thank you.
All right. Gary. While he's walking down, I'll tell you about Gary. Gary was also elected in 2011 and re-elected in 2015 to represent Citywide District 1. Gary has a background in business and finance, and along with his wife, Vicki, is a lifelong resident of Provo. He attended Brigham Young University also and holds a bachelor's degree in business management and finance. And he is currently employed with the family business, which is owning and managing commercial and residential properties along University Avenue in Provo. Previous to his service on the council, Gary served as a member of the Provo City Planning Commission. He and Vicki have 3 children that they've raised in this community. Gary, thank you.
This is one of the most difficult things I've ever done, and it's because it's one of the most wonderful things I've ever done. I'd like to start off and thank just a few people, and starting off with my wife. She has been very patient with me, and I look forward to the opportunity I have to make up for some of the sacrifices that she has made, and I'm grateful for her. I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to be involved with so many good people. People that I've served with, I have really grown to love, and I'm grateful for that. To have 2 mayors that I truly call good friends has been such a blessing to me, and as I've served, I've been able to see so many wonderful things that they have done. I'm grateful for the city employees. This is one of the hardest things that I get to do, is say goodbye on a daily basis to many of you. And I am grateful for all the work that you've done, and I'm even more grateful for your friendship. And I will never forget that. I love Provo. I'm grateful for the opportunity I've had to be here and serve. And I want to continue, and I will be. Thank you for all you have done for me. This has been the best experience that I've ever had, and I look forward to the next best experience that I've ever had. Thank you.
Dave Knecht. So Dave Knecht was elected in 2015 and currently represents District 3. The name Knecht means servant in German, and it's an appropriate title for this city councillor. Dave has been part of Task Force 2000, which formed Provo City's general plan many years ago. He's been involved in the Neighborhood Evaluation Committee and on the board for NeighborWorks Provo. He's previously served as a citywide council member from 2004 to 2006 and as neighborhood chair of the Provo South neighborhood. His wife, Vicki, is the current Provo South neighborhood chair. They have 3 children, and we're very grateful for the time you've given to the city of Provo. Dave, thank you.
Wow. Things just don't seem right. This is all backwards. I've spent a lot of time with this podium going the other way, talking to the council as a neighborhood chair for 13 years. And I started out in 1992, and here I am many years later, finally getting ready to retire from this and from my regular job. I appreciate the opportunity of serving the people of Provo, citywide, and my district in Southeast Provo. And people say, well, what's it like, Dave? What do you really do on the council? And I say, well, you know, it's a lot of land use, budget items, but really our biggest job is representing the public, representing you. And it's important not to lose sight of that, because when you work together, and I really appreciate working together, and we need to work together as a council and staff. It's like you have to be family. You have to get past the disagreements and respect each other and work together, and that's what I've enjoyed about this council and our staff and our mayor. It's been a very good experience. But we can't lose sight of who we represent. As for the 4 of us leaving and all that gray hair going away, there's a lot of institutional knowledge going, and Wayne Parker will still be there for a while. But it's always important to know why things are the way they are before you go ahead and change whatever it is you think needs to be changed. Maybe the reasons don't apply anymore, but until you understand the real reasons, it's easy to make assumptions. And other than that, I'm not sure that I have any parting words of wisdom, but I do think that we are well served by all the great employees and staff, and I've really enjoyed the council members. It's been a real great ride getting on with George Stewart, and we're both going, do we really want to do this a second time? Yeah, you know, after so many years, it's like you forget some of the pain and you come back for more. But it's kind of bittersweet, because there's just, yes, there are sleepless nights, but there's a lot of good things to be said. And so thanks again for the opportunity of being able to serve you.
So before I bring George down, this is actually really unusual that you have 4 council members retiring at the same time. Usually when councils change over, there's, somebody may have lost a campaign that they ran or whatever. But the League of Cities and Towns was impressed enough that with these 4 gentlemen that they were leaving, and we recognize that we have about 35, 36 years of municipal experience leaving the council this time. And fortunately, we've got some well-trained ongoing council members, and we're looking forward to working with the new council members. George, would you come join us?
We'll see if I can make it. Nothing good about getting older, there's something to hold on to.
So George Stewart was elected in 2015 to the citywide District 2 seat. George, as you know, has served as Provo City Mayor from 1994 to 1997. He served on the City Council previously from 2006 to 2009, and being selected by the Council to serve as a year as a Vice Chair and 2 years as a Chair. He and his wife, Joanna, have lived in the same house in Provo for 40 years and have raised 11 children. And if you've been keeping count, the other 3 had 11 children between them. George has worked in business as well as serving his church, and in total he had 7 years on council and 4 years as mayor. And we want to thank you, George, for your service.
Thank you. One thing a politician doesn't want to lose is his voice. But one of the things with Parkinson's is you have voice volume loss, so I'll try to make it. I'm full of gratitude tonight. First of all, for my dear wife, Joanna. She not only supported me in office, but she supported me running for office. She knew what that would be like because her father was mayor of Calgary, Alberta, for 5 terms. So she well knew what was in store for our family. Next, I want to thank the citizens of Provo who elected me, and then the marvelous staff that this city has. We have the best department directors in the country, and I can say that because we're voted consistently #1 in so many areas. And staff is what supports the department directors. We have incredible staff. So I'm just thankful that some of them are here tonight. Some are thanking me for my service, and I thank them for their service. I'd like to thank our current council members. They've been wonderful to serve with. I think this has been the calmest 2 years that I've served on the council. We've worked together well, and we have a great new mayor, Mayor Kafusi. She's been marvelous. She really has been. She asks for advice. She listens. It's just been a pleasure to serve with her and sit next to her in our work meetings. I'm really thankful to my Father in heaven for giving me the opportunity to serve. You have to be alive to serve. You have to have certain opportunities to serve like we've had. I'm just so grateful for all the blessings I've received. And again, I love you, Joanna. I love you, Provo. I love the city, and thank you.
George is going to hang on here for a few more minutes because the mayor wants to come talk to him as well. And when the mayor is finished, then we're going to invite all the council members and your spouses to come down. We'll get a group photo here in front of the dais. Mayor Kafusi.
It's a real pleasure to be here tonight and be amongst such great people and people that I call not only I claim them as my council, but my friends. Like Mayor Stewart said, I am often asking them for advice and what would you do? And one of my favorite go-tos, if you were mayor, what would you do? And I just sit back and soak up their advice and try and take it in and then try and make the right decisions. Tonight's a special night to have 4 council members leaving me, and I do say leaving me because I am going to miss each and every one of them. And I wanted to also thank the wives, Joanna and Vicky, who are here. Will you please stand? And I've got a little bouquet of flowers because I'm sure you've had these flowers brought to you multiple times on long council nights from your husbands. But I wanted to piggyback on that and give you flowers and tell you, just because, I don't know, I tell them all the time, I'm the first woman mayor. You get tears sometimes and feelings, but I know they wouldn't be the men they are without you. And so thank you. I wouldn't be the woman I am without my husband. So politics is tricky, and it can be hard, and it can wear on your soul. And so thank you for supporting your husbands and allowing me to work with them. It's been a true pleasure. Let's give them a round of applause. So I think everybody knows how much I admire Mayor Stewart, and it's an interesting club, this Mayor's Club. Until you've been and walked in these shoes, it's hard to judge us because it is a unique position to be in, and it's the most rewarding and wonderful job. I love my job. Mayor Stewart often tells me how much he loved being the mayor of Provo. We are lucky. We are lucky. We are blessed. And it's a real treat to serve with him and have him as one of my mentors. And because of that, and because of the impact he has had on my life, I felt like I wanted to give the Mayor's Award to Mayor Stewart. This is a unique award. It's a beautiful award, and it's never given out. It's really rare. And it's heavy as well. I just did a little write-up of Mayor Stewart, and aren't those pictures fabulous? I was telling my directors this morning how handsome Mayor Stewart was when he was, and you still are. You still are, but I told my directors this morning, did you know Mayor Stewart had black hair?
I did it one time.
Yeah, so what a great photo. And I just wanted to just say a few words about you, if that's okay. So it was 25 years ago in June of 1993 when George O. Stewart, already a successful businessman and consultant, had the impression there was something else he should be doing. And those impressions are a real thing. They are. It's a call to action, and I have felt that as well. Later, when an associate called to suggest he run for mayor, he thought, I don't know anything about politics. But the idea kept percolating, and 5 minutes before the deadline, he threw his hat in the ring. The rest, as they say, is history. Although he was considered a long shot in that first race, George ultimately became Mayor Stewart. And now, a quarter of a century later, no modern history of Provo City would be complete without him. His tenure, first as a mayor and then in 2 separate stints on the city council, has been marked by decisiveness. Whatever the tough issue, no matter his political opponents, George has been willing to make hard decisions and stand by them. In doing so, he has consulted his principles far more than the winds of politics. And to his enormous credit, he has approached even painful decisions or fierce adversaries with that charming smile, ultimately earning him the title, the Happy Warrior. It was Jimmy Stewart who brought It's a Wonderful Life to the big screen, with its tell of the difference one person can have on a family and a community. It's our earnest hope that as our own Mr. Stewart hangs his hat on these decades of public service, he feels a measure of the pride and gratitude that this community holds in our hearts for you. George Stewart, we admire you, we appreciate you. Thank you for your lasting difference you have made on us, on me, and on the city.
One without spouses and 1 minute. So let's do one, or either way.
Do you want to do one with just council or?
Oh, more stuff, Kay. Yeah.
We'll ask the mayor not to go too far because the second presentation is the Provology graduates. So I'll turn the time back over to the mayor.
It's a great night for our Provology class. It's their graduation. I don't know what they're going to do with all their their Tuesday nights for 3 hours. It's, for those of you that don't know what Provology is, it's a class that's free to the community that addresses every department in our city. It is the most amazing class you can take, and you learn so much about the city. When I was running for mayor, I took the class, and it was my first FaceTime with our directors, and everyone was so kind and just wonderful, and I learned so much. It was a real treat for me, and Provology is strong and going. We've even upped the ante. We're making it, where is Dixon? Oh, there's Dixon. Dixon's our wonderful person that manages it and runs it, and he does a fantastic job. And the beauty of Dixon is when we get together, our minds just spin, and we are constantly thinking, how do we make it bigger and better? And we are working on it. It'll be an ongoing tradition as long as I'm in the seat, because it's impactful, and I want the citizens to be heard. I want them to feel welcome. I don't take my seat for granted. I know that they are the ones that put me there, and I want them to learn about what I do, what it is like to be the mayor of Provo, and the wonderful people I get to work with. So let's go ahead. We have certificates. I'm going to read all your names, and then what do you think, Dixon? Do you want them to come up and stand and get a photo? And okay, why don't do you want to hand out as I read them? And there are some that weren't able to come. After we do our graduation, we have dinner upstairs, and just a brief moment, and we've got a little parting gift for all your sacrifice for putting in time to the city. I really appreciate it. You are going to be able to help me do my job better, because we will ask you for help for committees and commissions and other things later down the road. So tonight, our graduating class of Provology is Aaron Joseph Smith. And if you're here, come on up. Brian Bushman. Eden Soper. Jeffrey McLaughlin. Matt Garner. Melanie Epling. Mohit Qatar. Scott Glenn. Stephanie West. Bill Fillmore and Mary Fillmore. Blair Wu and Matthew Jacobs. Another beautiful piece about Provology is our students, I'm sure, have all become friends. I know when I took the class, I became very close to the people that were in Provology because you spend a lot of time together. It's really fun. Let's, Dixon, be in this picture. You're a huge piece of this. Let's get together. Come on, Bill and Mary, and let's take a photo and get you upstairs to eat. Yeah, Marco, you direct us.
The people step forward one step and what the council member Can I have you two switch? So you go up the step. You want to feet, get it. All right, 1, 2.
Yes.
I'm going to take a point of personal privilege. In all my thank yous, I forgot to thank the staff of the council office. This has been the greatest staff support I've ever received in the city council. So thank you. They just take care of this older man. I don't like to say I'm old, but just older. But thank you so much, staff.
All right, we will move on to item 3, a presentation of the comprehensive annual financial report by the Provo City Finance Department and HBME. And we'll invite Mr. Borget up. He's the Director of Administrative Services, as well as Mr. Miles, I believe, is with us from HBME.
Thank you, Chair Harding and the Honorable Council. We're pleased to bring this report to you. Just mention that there's a lot of effort and work that goes into this. It's called the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. It's 131 pages long, so it's a pretty comprehensive report. It involves the whole city. We have many directors and their staff that we work with that assist us, and it's a huge impact on the finance division of administrative services. I want to just give a special thanks to Dan Follett, to David Mortensen, Kelsey Zarbach, Anissa Orwin, Andrea Wright, and all others that have taken part in this. It's a big job. And I just want to share a few brief things, and then I'll turn the time over to Jeff Miles, who's the partner over HBME that audits our financial statements. And this is in the letter of transmittal on page 7 of the document. It says, "To the Honorable Mayor and members of the Municipal Council and the citizens of the City of Provo, state law and local ordinance requires that all general local governments publish within 6 months of the close of each fiscal year a complete set of financial statements presented in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles and audited in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards by a licensed certified public accountants. This is our report for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2019, and so we're here within the 6-month time frame, and that's the purpose. Just want to mention that this report is management representations concerning the finances of the city of Provo. We as a city and as an administration and as a council represent this report. It's our report. The auditors come to review it and audit it, but it is a report that was prepared by the finance division, and it represents management's representations. HBME LLC, a firm of licensed certified public accountants selected by the municipal council, have audited the city's financial statements. The goal of the independent audit is to provide reasonable assurance that the financial statements of the city of Provo for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2019 represent an accurate portrayal of the city's finance position in all material respects. I would mention that Jeff will be coming up in a few minutes, but there's also what's called a Single Audit Act of 2004. And what that is that one of the responsibilities of the auditors is not only to come in and audit our financial statements, but to review compliance and specific related to grants and other things received from the city. And I'm sure that Jeff will talk about that briefly. The comprehensive annual financial report is in 3 sections. There's an introductory section, a financial section, and a statistical section. I would also mention that a couple weeks ago in a work session, Jeff came in and had kind of went through some things with the council, so this isn't the first time that we've talked about this report. As part of the transmittal letter, there's some different things that it talks about, but it talks a little bit about the economic condition. I would just mention that the city's continues to do well, and revenues have continued to exceed the budget. We've seen in recent years where our increases over the budget aren't as dramatic as they were in the past, but we still see positive trends, consistent with the Utah economy and with the national economy. Sales tax, which is our #1 revenue source, came in 609,000 over the current budget, or 3.2%. And for the first 2 months that we've received sales tax in 2020, we continue to be on that same trend. I'd also just mention a couple of major initiatives that we talked a little bit about in the transmittal report, and are big things that are happening to Provo. The city's in the process of designing and constructing a new airport terminal. The groundbreaking ceremony took place November 6th. The city received over the past year $9 million in funding from the state, and has received a commitment to provide $4.3 million in funding from the county. The new and larger terminal will include 4 gates with the ability to expand to 10. One other thing that I would mention is that in November 2018, the residents of Provo approved a general obligation bond to construct a new public safety and a city hall and a fire station on Canyon Road. Construction is in the process on the fire station, and the public safety and city center is in the design stages, with construction planned to begin in spring of 2020. Also talk a little bit about some significant events. Want to just share a couple of those. Duncan Aviation Project has been completed. It was a $59 million project. 250,000 square feet is currently employing over 200 people, and eventually we expect to have 450 employed at the airport. Also, during this past year, there was acquisition of the regional sports park, which is the property for it. It's a 100-acre site acquired by a single owner, requiring major federal government process and involved the mayor and Congress at all levels. And so we consider this to be a very exciting project that will come in the future. I would mention a little bit about one of the things that we participate in and have for years and years, over 20 years, is we belong to an organization called the Governmental Financial Officers Association, and they have a program where you actually send in your financial report, they review it, and they check to make sure that it has all the essential elements. And then they also look to provide feedback. And each year they have some suggestions, and we continue to improve the report and continue to make it better for the residents and for others. And I would just mention that we received the award for the 2018 report that was the year before, and we plan on submitting this report for review so that we can continue to improve and make sure to the residents and to the council that we are meeting all the legal guidelines and requirements. I would mention that our comprehensive annual financial report is on our website. If residents have an interest in reviewing it or looking at it, they're welcome to get on. They can just go into the finance department and go into reports, and then it will have our comprehensive annual report, and you can pull up 2019 or you can go back 10 years, whichever report you would like. And so it's there available for the residents to view. We'll also be coming back in about a month. We have what's called a popular annual financial report. It's a summarized version with more graphs and tables and a little easier for residents to understand. And so we will make that available, and we will present that in a council meeting in January, and we would encourage you to review it when it comes out as well. And that will be presented in a meeting, a council meeting, just like we're doing here tonight. With that, I'll turn the time over to Jeff Miles, who is the partner for HBME, and he can share some additional insights and walk you through a little bit on this single audit compliance report.
Thank you, John. They always put the fun stuff before the accountants get up here, and so there's not a lot of people left in the room when I get up here to speak. As John mentioned, the document, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, is prepared by the city, and there's only 2 pages in here that are prepared by us, the auditors, and you'll find that on pages 17 and 18, which is our report on the city's financial statements. In our report, we list management's responsibilities and our responsibilities as the auditor, and then give an opinion, which you'll find at the bottom on page 17. It says, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly, in all material respects, the respective financial position of the governmental activities, the business type activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of the Provo City Corporation as of June 30th, 2019, and the respective changes in financial position, and where applicable, cash flows thereof, and the respective budgetary comparison for the general fund and for the year then ended in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. So we issued a clean opinion on the city's financial statements for fiscal year 2019. In addition to that, I brought other compliance reports that we're required to do with our audit. The first, I don't know if the council members each have the packet I brought tonight. On page 1, every audit we're required to gain an understanding of the city's internal controls, and as we're going through the process of the audit, or every transaction that we look at, we're ensuring that those transactions are being handled in accordance with the city's internal controls, and that they are functioning properly. And during the course of our audit, we did not identify any deficiencies in internal control within the city. With that, the previous work session where we met with council, the state auditor's office is putting extra emphasis on internal controls of cities. So we did provide a document where the city can do an internal analysis of how their controls are functioning. There's kind of a scorecard that they put together, and I know that they're going to be working on that and reporting to council how the city is. And I think it's important to say, yeah, that things are good now, but it's important we keep things operating properly within the city so we don't have any problems in the future. And on page 3 is our report on the single audit. As Mr. Borgett had mentioned, that federal government requires us to audit cities that have a large amount of capital or grants, federal grants that come in, and we audited the single audit this year and did not find any non-compliance with the grant monies that the city has been received, that they've been spent for the appropriate items that pertain to the grants that the money was received for. And then the final report that you'll find is on page 10. The state auditor's office has certain compliance issues that they like us to look at each year. The items that we tested this year, you'll see in the middle of the page, budgetary compliance, justice court, restricted taxes and related restricted revenue, fund balance, Utah Retirement Systems, Open and Public Meeting Act, and Treasurer's Bond. And we did not identify any instances of noncompliance for fiscal year 2019. Really the audit went really well this year. I was mentioning to John, this is the first time we haven't had a new accounting system or some sort of new accounting pronouncement coming. So it was a great year. Appreciate the relationship that we have with the management team at Provo City, and grateful for the council to give us the opportunity to provide this service for the city. Any questions from council or mayor at this time? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Miles.
Can I make one comment?
Please.
I apologize. I think this is very important, and I got nervous and forgot. I think Hannah actually put it up on the screen, but I want to discuss this because it's very important. This is our general fund balance, the unassigned and assigned fund balance, and we are, by the state, limited to 25%. And I think it's a major accomplishment from the council and administration that we are right there. We're 24.32, so just slightly under 25%, but I would just say that is a very healthy fund balance. It's not something that just comes by accident. It requires good fiscal management and a council that is conservative about funds. And so particularly for these outgoing council members, I think it should be very complimentary that they're leaving the city with the fund balance of the general fund in good standing. And so I think that's important. We've also reviewed this with the auditors, and they agree with the calculation. So I just think it's good to just mention that.
Thank you, Mr. Borgett.
I just want to thank you. Our budget ended July 30th, a budget year. You're getting this done and completed, and you got the CAFR coming out in a few weeks, and you're already jumping in. I hope you have a good Christmas, because I know as soon as you get back, you start the budget all over again.
We're going to enjoy the next 20 days.
Okay. I hope you enjoy that, because you have earned it, and I am grateful for all that you do. As I started on the council, one thing that you mentioned to me is we need to make sure that our finances are we're looking to the future, and I appreciate your input and your guidance on helping us keep looking to the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winterton, for expressing those thoughts, and I think they're common among the council. We are going to jump ahead to item 7. An implied motion on an ordinance amending the Claim Settlement Authority schedule in Provo City Code and providing for automatic inflation adjustments. And after 7, we are going to move to item 11 before returning back to item 4. So item 7 will be presented by our council attorney, Brian Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This item was presented to you during the work session today. It's a long-needed, I believe, cleanup or adjustment of the code. As was explained in the work session, there's a provision of the city code that determines when there's a claim against the city, who has the authority to settle it. And that can be done by the department director or by the legal office or by the mayor with a recommendation from the CAO, depending on the amount of the claim. The amounts in the statute, in the ordinance, have not been adjusted since 1984? 81, I thought. 81, since 1981. And because they have not been adjusted for so long, it's created an administrative burden where pretty much every vehicle accident that the city's involved in requires the mayor's approval to settle the claim because of the amounts involved. So it's been recommended that those amounts be adjusted. The amounts that you see here come from the work session today. They were adjusted slightly upwards. The original proposal was to adjust them purely for inflation from 1981 when they were set until now. That resulted in some not particularly even numbers. And so there was a motion in the work session today to round those up just a little bit. And then the new subparagraph E would create an automatic inflation adjustment every 5 years, beginning in 2025. Happy to answer any questions about that.
I don't see any questions, so we will open this item to the public for comment. If anyone is here and would like to speak to this, please come forward now. Seeing none, we will close public comment. Is there any council discussion? Seeing none, I will call for a vote on the implied motion. All in favor? That's unanimous. And then Mr. Jones, if you would lead us in item 11, which is an ordinance enacting Provo City Code, section 1503-105, temporary limitations on certain sewer connections.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully, we don't have Development Services and Public Works people showing up later for this. They'll be pleasantly surprised when it's taken care of if they show up later. But this has been an item the council is intimately familiar with because it's been an ongoing discussion for several months now. Essentially, to summarize, the issue is that there are limitations on sewer capacity, principally on the west side of I-15, although also some areas of the Grandview Hill. And those limitations have created some concerns that if development continues as it has on the west side, that there won't be sewer capacity to accommodate that development. And there's been concern that without providing some guidance to developers about how that sewer capacity is going to be allocated, that there's too much uncertainty and makes it too difficult for good decisions to be made about development. So this proposed section of the code that would be enacted by this ordinance provides for a temporary limitation on sewer connections in that area. There is, jumping to the very end of the ordinance, there is a sunset provision that says this entire section of the code would automatically be repealed once certain projects in the sewer master plan are completed, because then the sewer capacity limitations would not exist anymore. In the meantime, a developer who wants to develop in the area affected by this sewer capacity limitation must demonstrate to the Director of Public Works that there's adequate sewer capacity for their proposed development, that they have a connection through a gravity sewer line to the 36-inch sewer main that's described in the section, that they providing adequate sewer capacity to their project doesn't involve a lift station other than those that are in the master plan, that zoning is in place for the development, and that the development project plan has been approved. And if they meet all of those requirements, they can be allocated up to 40 connections, although if it is a phased project, they can receive additional connections, but only if for each phase, 50% of the previous phase has already been constructed. And there's provisions in here that say that the allocated sewer connections are not transferable, and that the Director of the Department of Development Services has authority to consider circumstances where it appears that applicants are coming in and submitting multiple applications for what is essentially the same project in order to try to get additional allocations more than what the intent of this ordinance is. So that's principally what the ordinance says, and again, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? One just popped into my head while you were describing that, and hopefully you can just tell me that I'm coming up with things that aren't realistic or whatever. But so in the phasing, they can be allotted in blocks of 40. For a larger multi-phase project, it has to be phased into the 40s, and the second phase can be allocated once the first phase gets to 50% completion. Are we opening up a loophole that then the third phase could be requested if the second phase was 50% completed without the first phase being 100% complete.
No, because they could never get allocations for the second phase unless so it's a stepped approach, right? In order to get allocations for phase 2, they have to have finished 50% of phase 1 first.
Right.
Now, I don't know whether this is a loophole. You could finish 50% of phase 1 and get, maybe this is your question. You could finish 50% of phase 1 and get 40 new allocations, and then finish 50% of phase 2 and get 40 new allocations. You could do that. I don't know. I can't speak to the possibility of that or probability of that happening.
That would be very difficult for a developer to tie that much capital up in 3 different phases, because a lot of the times they'll take that capital and move it to the next one. It's a possibility. You'd have to have a well-funded situation, but often I see a developer using some of his funding for one phase to help move to the next phase. And I think that would be a wise thing for them to be doing.
There's also another provision that just occurred to me, which is, and Mr. Pepperoni can speak to this, but one of the requirements to get your allocation is that the development project plan has been approved. So I think it likely the city thought it was not in the best interests for phase 3 to proceed while phase 1 and 2 were only half done, that they may be likely to not approve the project plan for phase 3. But I'd throw that out there for Mr. Pepperoni to weigh in on if he wants to.
Okay. Mr. Strachan, did you have a?
I was just going to say, we also think that the time involved in starting and getting to a point where you're 50%, by the time you got to the third phase, we think we're probably close to the end of the 5 years that we need to get the infrastructure in place anyway.
Good point. Okay, thank you. Any other questions among the council? Okay, seeing none, we will open this item to public comment, particularly if there are any chairs from West Provo that would like to speak. Please come forward, and then after we'll open this up to the general public.
Becky Bogdan, Lakewood, Provo, Utah resident. Anyway, I'm sure most of you already know my feelings about this, but I'm going to state them for the public record anyway. Personally, I would like the master plan to be completed, the text and everything for that, before we continue to go further. And also, I'm going to go ahead and fill in for Beth a little bit and speak a little bit for, we have some chairs, and myself included, that would prefer that we not give preferential treatment necessarily to residential, but to maybe a store or something that could help the west side rather than more residential at this time. So if residential maybe came in congruent with the grocery store, and that would be more helpful than just allotting all of these connections to anything residential. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Bogdan. Any other public comment?
I'm Sam Ullman from Provo, and this is a dear subject to me because my daughter is in charge of all the sewer lines in Salt Lake. So I've had to follow along with every building. She just finished a lift station, 100 by 100 foot by 80 foot deep, like $12 million. This stuff's expensive, and you can't develop around it. You have to develop with it. And if there is not a plan in place way ahead of when they want to build a house, they don't get to turn their toilet on. And I think that we need to be a little more restrictive on allowing development to just, oh, we'll make it happen next year, or by the time you get ready to develop it, we'll have the sewer line in. That's a pretty dangerous thing because it all backs up in your basement. And so if the planning isn't in place for the end view of this, you take another look at what you allow out there before you do it. It's critical.
Thank you. Any other public comment? We'll close public comment. And any discussion among the council?
So Becky mentioned that it'd be nice to have the West Side plan finished, not just the map, but the policy, to know what we want, where we want it, when we want it. I like what's before us, but I think it's only part of the picture, and that if we don't decide where we want to allocate this precious resource, you could say, then we just need to make that decision before we put it out and say that it's available, because we might want to either reserve some for certain purposes or certain projects, and so I'm just not quite comfortable voting for this right now.
Can I just ask for clarification? So you're going to vote, you're saying you're going to vote no on this for now because you don't think we're ready for this right now?
I'm thinking about that.
Okay. If I could share my thoughts on this, I think this is needed at the moment because we do have some properties that already meet, or at least some of the criteria, and so they already have they've already been rezoned, but perhaps they don't have access yet to the sewer, and so that this I believe gives an orderly method to handle the properties that have already been, they're already partway through the process. And so this gives an orderly way to handle them and perhaps allow us to use the allocations that we have now, even if there's a project that's further along but does not have access. I think that this is a good plan to handle those situations. But I fully agree with Mr. Knecht that this is just a small piece to the overall question of how do we allocate the sewer connections while there's while there's a limit on them until we get the rest of the infrastructure in place. The most critical piece, and I say this in part because I know the councilors-elect will be listening to this later, but the most critical part is going to be what does the council do with incoming rezone requests, and I think Ms. Bogdan has brought up a really good point, and Mr. Knecht as well. I feel strongly that we need to get the West Provo master plan in place before we sign off on any more large projects. I do think we need to have that direction, and we need to work through that process before we make some decisions that really affect the area. So I don't know if you want to have anyone answer some of your specific questions, but I feel good about voting for this, but knowing that yes, that this is to me the easy question. The hard questions are going to be later, and in deciding which projects to rezone, because that's where we really will influence this.
So I guess that does leave me with one question. If someone can give me an estimate of how many sewer hookups would be allocated based on what's already been zoned, and how much sewer capacity would be left for whatever, whether it be a school or a shopping center or something.
Off the top of my head, and I'm sure Real has more accurate numbers, but my recollection is that the estimation is that there's about 500 to 600 connections, and that there's about 70 that could potentially be used up by property that's already zoned, approximately. Does that seem right, Bill?
Perhaps a little more than that, but yes, I'd say that's pretty close to accurate. We've had many discussions about a West Side store and about a West Side school and making sure that we have capacities held out for those kinds of facilities that the population would want and would want to see happen.
Thank you.
Okay, so as long as we, so your point, Dave, is that we just, going forward, need to be careful about the new rezones that would then eat into the reserve.
Yes. Any other council discussion? Seeing none, I will call for a vote on the implied motion. All in favor? It's unanimous. We will now return to item 4, a resolution appointing John Magness as a policy analyst for the Provo City Municipal Council. This will be presented by our Council Executive Director, Cliff Strachan.
Hello, Council. Thank you again. As you know, Mr. Mumford took a really nice opportunity up in Cache County, and he's enjoying his experience up there. In seeking a new policy analyst, we did a wide search. We ended up with 35 candidates, interviewed 7 of them, and settled on a very, very qualified candidate. Very happy to introduce you to John Magness. John, would you and your wife Laura join us, please? So this is John and Laura. So the Provo City Code does provide for the council to appoint policy analysts to serve them as part of their legislative staff. John comes with extensive academic training in political science and a lot of experience, about 19 years worth of experience as in policy analysis. He was a senior advisor, senior administrative aide to a Ventura County supervisor for about 4 years. He worked for Waste Management as a community and municipal relations manager and has spent about the last 16 years with Athena Group doing consulting for state and local clients, mostly in California. When we did the review of qualifications, and when we did ask for writing samples and had him do a presentation on affordable housing for the interview panel, he blew us away with his expertise and his depth of analysis, and it's my pleasure to recommend John Magness to you as a policy analyst for the City Council, and hope you'll approve the resolution. John, do you want to take a minute just to introduce yourself?
Council members, Mayor, thank you for the opportunity to work for you. I look forward to it. Policy work is what I really enjoy. I love reading and I love writing, so this is right up my alley. I hope I can be of service to you and help you out with what policy goals you are trying to reach and the objectives you want. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Magness.
I'm going to assume there's no questions. If there are, I'll stay here. Okay.
Welcome.
Yes.
Well, I just wanted to say welcome to John. I've had an opportunity to just visit with him for a few minutes. And I just want to thank Cliff and our staff for landing someone that could bring this much a broad experience to bear on this position.
It's wonderful to see this kind of expertise come to our office, so thank you for accepting the position. And we welcome you to Provo.
I just want to echo that. This is, I didn't have time to sit in on the meetings, but I had confidence in our staff, and I'm very pleased in the outcome.
Thank you. Item 5. Oh, I guess we should probably vote on that motion. Let's do that. So I'll call for a vote on the implied motion. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Now we can move to item 5, a resolution consenting to the appointment of individuals to various boards and commissions. And this will be presented by our mayor, Michelle Kafusi.
All right, this is great. Our boards and commissions, some have expired and it's time to reappoint some. And I am excited to announce our new appointees. For the Energy Board, we have Julie Radel, Cheryl Taylor, Ned Hill, and for those who thought I was going to let Gary Winterton and George Stewart retire tonight, they were sorely wrong. Gary Winterton and George Stewart will both have accepted positions on the Energy Board, which I am thrilled about. And then our appointee for the Planning Commission will be Lisa Jensen.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor. And we will open this up to the public for comment. If anyone is here and would like to speak to this. Seeing none, we'll close it and bring it back to the council for any discussion. Let me just voice my appreciation for the many individuals who serve their community on the various boards and commissions throughout the Provo City government. This is a great way for residents, individuals to be engaged and involved, particularly when they have particular interests or technical skills. We have some really well-run departments and run services, and a lot of that is thanks to the service of our boards and commissions.
Thank you for letting us continue to play.
All right. If there's no other comment, discussion, I will call for a vote. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Item 6 is a resolution adopting the 2020 council regular meeting schedule. This will be presented by Mr. Cliff Strachan.
Council, we went over this in work session to keep it real simple. We did our best to accommodate school breaks, holidays, the various elections that are happening next year at a state and federal level. And the schedule you have before you mostly is a first and third Tuesday schedule with some exceptions in a couple of months. We ask you to support this calendar.
Thank you. Any questions about the calendar? We'll invite the public if anyone would like to comment on the schedule. Seeing none, any discussion on the calendar? I'll call for a vote. All in favor of adopting this calendar? Mr. Sewell, would you?
Yeah, my hand is up.
All right, sorry.
I did have one quick technical question or maybe request. I was just looking at my calendar. I know this doesn't apply to the 4 people who are leaving here, by the way, but
I think they were speculating on whether they should abstain or not. But
I'm just looking at I know Elizabeth is great about populating our calendars, and I see that it looks like maybe the calendar that I have is sort of going on the rotation that we had, but it doesn't necessarily.
it'll be changed this week to reflect.
I just didn't want to go in and manually do it if she's going to do it.
Yeah, no, she'll have it. She'll have the calendar all updated this week for you.
She's wonderful. Yeah, thank you.
She's great.
All right. With that vote underway, we will move ahead to item 8, a resolution adopting an updated water conservation plan. This will be presented by Mr. Shane Jones, engineer in the Public Works Department.
Thank you, Council. In 1999, the state legislature passed a law that all municipalities or water providers adopt a water conservation plan and adopt an update to that plan every 5 years thereafter. This item was presented to you on October 8th, and at that time, during that presentation, I just remind you that it was noted that Provo City has exceeded the state's goal for 25% reduction by 2020 from the usage in 2000. As of this year, we're actually have reduced our water usage by 31%. And And I'll also point out that just this year, the state revised their goals before they even got to 2025. They've revised their goals and established new regional water conservation goals. And Provo today is meeting, or actually ahead of, the 2030 regional conservation goals that the state set. So Provo's doing great, but we don't want to get too comfortable because we know that things can change pretty quickly, and there's more that can be done as outlined in this plan. And so with that, I'll just ask if there's any questions or concerns.
Yeah, thank you. I read it very carefully back in October and really enjoyed it. I think it's a really important document, and I'm really pleased to see the progress we're already making. One concern I had was the predictions about snowpack based on climate models, and I had read some models that were much more severe in their warnings about snowpack loss than what I found in the report, and I couldn't tell. So I was just curious who was providing those climate models and whether or not those are statewide accepted. Are they more conservative or more cautious or more optimistic than average? I just wanted to get a sense of that because I didn't know where those models came from.
I appreciate the question. Every year I go to a water conservation or a water conference. It's actually held here in Provo at the conference center. And every year we have climatologists come and predict the water year, what kind of water we can expect. And it's generally a very enjoyable session because the climatologists are generally very uncertain. And they make their best guess, but there's never a great deal of certainty. Mother Nature is always unpredictable. So I don't know, I can't speak to the specific information that you read or understood, but that's what I will reiterate, that's why we need to be careful, because we don't know what's going to happen. And I will say that that wet water that is available to us is limited, and if without conservation, as shown in previous presentations, we won't have enough water to meet build-out.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much, and that was basically the gist of my concern, is that for the very same reasons you were just describing, even though we're doing so well, the models could be conservative. I've read a variety of different things. The person I most recently spoke to about this was going into very fine-grained detail about, the snowpack at, 10,000 feet and above is going to actually be pretty good, but then it's sort of in the mid-range where it's going to be quite devastating, and that may or may not affect certain watersheds in the same way. And so it was, as you say, very complicated and uncertain. But if they're any worse than what we're hoping here in this report, then our conservation efforts are even that much more important. I just
Absolutely.
am grateful to know. And I'd be, anyway, maybe you and I can talk later about it, and I'd love to know more about those conferences, because that interests me a great deal. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Shane, with the conservations that we have, I know that we want to conserve. We've got to conserve. And water is an unusual thing, because it's also in a position of use it or lose it. And with the adjudication going on and the opportunities that we have, as we conserve, are we also conserving our right to maintain the water that we have? We've had people with great vision that have kept the water, put Provo in a good position compared to many other communities. And as we say, use it or lose it, I want to make sure that we're not losing, even though we are not quite using the way we did in the past.
That's a very astute observation. And that's one that really the attorneys need to answer, because water law is evolving right now as we speak. There's a lot of bills before the legislature this year that will modify the way we've done things, if passed, historically. And that's a concern. The state program is use it or lose it. We have approximately, well, we have more paper water than we have wet water available to us. So that's why we've developed so many different sources, because, and we have the water right, paper water rights that we do, because we recognize that even though we have the water, a right to the water on paper, it's not always there. It's not always wet water in the stream or in the mountains where we need it. And sometimes we have to take it from our springs, sometimes we have to take it from the groundwater, sometimes we have to treat it. And that's something that the state needs to acknowledge, Division of Water Rights, and legislatures need to address. I think we're in pretty good stead. We have good attorneys and lawyers that are looking at that, and I'm sure that we'll be able to preserve our rights. And I'm hopeful that the legislature will respect that.
Thank you for all your work on that.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Is there anyone in the public, anyone here in attendance who would like to speak to this? Any council discussion on this? See none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? It's unanimous. Item 9 is an ordinance amending Provo City Code to correct and update Title 18, which is stormwater, and the associated design and management manual. This will be presented by Mr. Brian Torgeson, Public Services Division Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just like to take a minute and thank the council, especially those 4 members who are leaving. Thank you for your support. Gary and Kay have been here as long as I have at Provo City, so appreciate all your service and your work. So real quickly, this was presented to you a couple of times in the work session. Again, this is the revision to Title 18. Majority of this update is in response to coming into compliance with our MS4 permit, which is a state permit to discharge to the Provo River and Utah Lake. I'll just go through just a high-level summary. Hannah, can you advance? Just there is a summary page here the council can see, hopefully. Oh, there we go. So again, we talked about in our previous discussions, we had a setback from the river, which we've removed. And we'll bring that to you in a later meeting once that Provo River Master Plan has been completed. Also like to give you a heads up, and we've discussed this before, but in March timeframe, the state will have revised requirements in our MS4 permit requiring LID, low impact development standards, and retention standards for all stormwater, which is both a water quantity and a water quality initiative. So you will see us again shortly, but again, these are changes to bring us in compliance with our MS4 permit, as well as align us with our master plan that's been recently adopted. So, are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Torgerson. And we'll open this to the public. Would anyone like to speak to this? Seeing none, is there any council discussion? Call for a vote. All in favor? It's unanimous. Item 10 is a resolution amending the Provo City Impact Fee Analysis and Impact Fee Facilities Plan with respect to sewer projects and facilities. This will be presented by Mr. John Borgett, Director of Administrative Services, as well as Rebecca Andrus, Engineer in the Public Works Department. Mr. Borgett.
Thank you, Chair Harding and the Honorable Council. I'm hoping that we can, I don't know if you can see this okay up on the screen. I can't without my glasses, but I can barely see it if I put them on. So there are some projects. There's a 10-year plan that's part of when they do an impact fee analysis. And we did an impact fee analysis. Well, we completed it and actually made an adjustment to our impact fees last July 1st. The study and the discussion was passed by the council last early spring or late winter. And in that 10-year plan, there were some things that have changed and felt like we wanted to update the plan. Our recommendation is not to change the impact fee, but to update the 10-year plan. Now, when you make a change to the 10-year plan, because there's references to it and it's part of the impact fee analysis, there's two different parts of the analysis. One's called it's called the Sewer Impact Fee Facilities Plan, which is also referred to as an IFFP, and then there's the Sewer Impact Fee Analysis. And so both those were affected, and so we've given those to the council to review. But what I want to talk a little bit about is how the plan changed, because that's really the reason for the recommendation. There's two items in blue, if you can see those up there. One's on 600 West, and what the plan is to upsize that sewer line in 600 West for capacity, and that will have multiple benefits to the city. But the mix project that's taking place on University Parkway will require some of that additional capacity, and it will also have some benefit to the city. And so what the plan was is to add that so that we could upsize that line, and then that will actually be funded or paid for substantially by the mix partners, and then we would issue them some impact fee credits for those costs, because it would save the city from actually spending that money, and it would be used for what's in the plan. The next item down, which is East Bay Boulevard, that's some infrastructure that would go in place that's related to the medical school that's going to be going there at the golf course, and so that's recommended to be added. If you go down towards the bottom, there's three areas, and these are the most significant changes to the plan, particularly the last item, W11, is that earlier on the plan was that we had tentatively planned on putting the new treatment plant on the west side. Had discussions with the council, had multiple public discussions, had consultants involved, looked at all the pros and cons, and after a significant review and analysis, the determination was made to put the treatment plant adjacent to where our current treatment plant is. And as a result of that change, it's going to require a 36-inch line that will bring sewage from the west side over to where our current treatment plant is. And then there's also a lift station that will be required. And so those are the main changes. And so we're recommending that the council approve these changes through resolution. The council is never required to charge the full impact fee. They can charge up to that impact fee, but we don't recommend, due to the fact that we just increased them in July, that we don't do that. One of the plans and one of the things that we've talked about is that we want to come back more regularly on impact fees so that the increases aren't as significant and they're up to date, and we don't come back all at once, because last year we did all of our utilities as well as public safety. And so we would recommend that when we come back and start working on it about a year from now, that one of the ones that we look at is wastewater, because it's already changed from when we did it last time. The other thing I would mention is that The work on impact fees takes a substantial amount of time. And then the work that was done on the sewer impact fees, and particularly the 10-year plan, was one of the first things that was completed and one of the first impact fees that we looked at. And so the information was a little older, and that's another reason why these changes needed to be made. But with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. As mentioned, Rebecca Andrus is here, who's one of our engineers, and she could answer questions specifically. So, and I would also mention that we did talk about this in our last work session.
Any questions for Mr. Borgett? Okay, not seeing any, so we will open this item to the public, if anyone is here and would like to speak to it. Seeing none, is there any council discussion? Let me just thank Mr. Borgett for, as well as Public Works, for your work on this and for your clear explanation. It's very helpful. Yes.
I know that there is a process that we went through to get to this, and did you follow? You basically are following the same process. You're just putting in new numbers and then having those follow down the line. Isn't that the way it works, John? Because the process has will stay the same.
And I would mention that Zion Public Finance and Bowens and Collins, who are our consultants that we worked through on the impact fee analysis, we had them come in and review it. I would also mention that I did make a call and talk with a member of the Deanne Hewish, who works with the Home Builders Association, had a discussion about it. I know she discussed it briefly with her group too. We haven't went through the full public process and had those meetings because we're really not recommending on changing impact fees. We will do that when we come back further to review in about another year and go through that. But we've went through the normal process for going through and doing all the analysis, and we did make that call, and they're aware of it. They're aware we're going to be talking about it in this meeting. They could have come if they wanted to and ask questions, but I did talk to her, and they are aware of it.
I met with Deanne today also, and she was understanding. She also explained, boy, that was a lot of work as we worked on it over those months, and then changing it this quickly. She said, there was some angst, but on the other hand, she completely understood, and she says, I get it.
The other thing that they're excited about, is coming back on a more regular basis and not with the whole onslaught that we take it section at a time, and then we come back every 2 years and keep that up to date. And so we're meeting that commitment. We plan on doing that.
I think that's a wonderful thing to do. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other discussion? See none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? It's unanimous. Item 12, and unless there's an objection, Mr. Strachan, I think I'll read both 12 and 13 in together. We'll discuss them together, but then vote on them separately. Item 12 is the resolution approving and authorizing a Section 108 loan transaction for $2.5 million for infrastructure improvements to fulfill obligations related to the expansion of Duncan Aviation. And then 13 is the resolution approving the transfer of $2.5 million in Section 108 loan proceeds from the CDBG fund to the airport fund for municipal infrastructure related to the expansion of Duncan Aviation. And if Mr. Gary McGinn is here, we'll ask him to come up and speak to item 12. And Mr. McGinn is the Director of Community and Neighborhood Services. And I apologize for misstating the name of your department earlier.
I do it all the time. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be able to do this tonight, because what we have before you in this resolution is the culmination of something that this council started in the past, which was helping to get Duncan Aviation to come to Provo City. And as a part of that, infrastructure needs were to be constructed by the city, and a part of that, the council authorize the mayor to enter, to pursue a Section 108 loan from HUD to pay for a portion of that infrastructure. And what this resolution does is now it allows us to complete that process and authorizes the mayor to execute the note and the contract and other various loan documents that are necessary to complete that transaction. And so it's nice to be able to do that at the end of this year and hopefully get this all wrapped up before the end of the year. Any questions?
Yeah. So for the benefit of the public, they may not understand. We took out a loan, but the money to repay that loan is coming from, what, CDBG money?
Yes, this is a Section 108 loan. It is through the federal government CDBG program, and we will have to repay that loan over the next decade, but it's a very good rate, and HUD does this for communities all across the country to help with economic development. And having Duncan Aviation in our community with the jobs that it's bringing, we had to certify the jobs and show that this is economic development.
So I guess my point is we will be using the community development block grant funds from the federal government to repay the loan?
Correct.
Rather than using local monies from our sales tax or property tax or general fund.
Yes, and John Borgett is here, and he can walk through the money and how it will flow. But with this agreement, it allows us to complete those transactions.
Other questions?
I know that every year we come in, we ask, what is the CDBG fund? What are we going to get this year? How does it go? But we're quite confident that this is not something that is going to go away. There was some issues at one time, concerns that CDBG funding was going down last year. I know it went up last year, and I think it did the year before also, that we are increasing again in those funding opportunities.
Yes.
How secure are we in those CDBG funds for repaying of this loan?
Well, if things continue as they have been, I believe we will still get CDBG funding. And Provo gets that funding, and not only do we use it in Provo, but we also, in our consortium with other communities in the county, they get funding through us. And we're always subject to the federal budget, and depending on how that goes. But at least for the foreseeable future, I don't think we see any complete cutting off of the CDBG funds. It may fluctuate in how much is available, but there will still be CDBG funding.
And I love the fact that you mentioned that other communities are going to develop, because Duncan is going to make a major difference to all those communities, not just Provo, but the other communities. I'm grateful for their participation and think that they should participate.
This is probably the favorite funding program for the federal government, the Congress. It's not going to go away.
It'd have to be a really bad budget.
They have proposed changing it, and it just goes year after year. It probably is the most popular program for Congress to fund.
And communities use it all across the nation for this exact purpose, to help communities develop economically, to bring jobs into the community. And we were able to use these monies to create the infrastructure that's necessary for Duncan Aviation to thrive and bring jobs into Provo and the surrounding communities.
Any other questions for Mr. McGinn? After we're going to invite Mr. Borgett to come up and say a few things, but anything from Mr. McGinn? Okay, thank you. Mr. Borgett, would you be willing to come and just give us a...
So just kind of to explain how this works, what we would do if when we receive the loan and receive the money, the Fund 273, which is our CDBG fund, would would basically have a liability for the money that's owed. And then they would actually receive the money, Fund 273, and then through the council's approval tonight, we would transfer that money over to the airport to reimburse the airport for money that it's already spent that was for the purpose of the infrastructure that went in related to the ramp and also Duncan Aviation going there. I would also mention that with the CDBG funding, there's also enough funding to still do, if things continue at our current level, to do a number of other CDBG projects, but this would be the first thing that commitment that we would make as far as what our CDBG allocation funds amount comes through, that we would need to pay that. If for some reason, unforeseen reason, that the CDBG funding program went away and we got zero, then we would come back and plan on using general fund or other sources to meet the obligation, because we would always want to make sure that Provo kept its strong bond rating and kept its commitment to meet its obligations. And it's about $280,000 a year commitment, and we would find a way. But I don't see that being likely at all, and I think this is a great program, as Gary McGinn has stated, for the very purpose that we would be using it for.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Borgett. Any questions for Mr. Borgett? Okay, thank you. As we have in the past, we will open both of these items to the public for comment.
I'm Sam Ullman, Provo resident, and I almost hate to comment on this, but I talked to the Duncan guy a few minutes ago, and he said 70% of those jobs at Duncan are from out of Provo. They come in from outside the city. Is 70% of this CBD community block grant development funding coming from other cities who are benefiting from these jobs? Or is this all out of Provo's pocket? Maybe we need to ring up the trick or treat bill a little down the road, because and he didn't know exact numbers, but he was making an estimate. He says he does have some people in Provo working there, and I'm relieved to hear that. But anyway, that ought to be a question that we answer when we're making a community development for the whole county. And it sounded to me like what I heard was this is a county effort to some extent, but it's not very clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ullman. Any other public comment? Seeing none, is there any council discussion on these items? Yes, Mr. Knecht.
Yeah, I would just like to kind of respond a little bit. When we bring a business, a good paying business like the jobs provided by Duncan to Provo, we don't have a guarantee on how many of the people that work there will actually live in Provo. But I would like to think as the west side develops and new housing is built out there, that people would be inclined to buy some of those new homes and live closer to where they actually work. We have Qualtrics and others that are looking to expand and provide jobs here in Provo. But it kind of hopefully equals out, because anytime you bring a business into the Provo-Orem area or even the county, sure, some people are going to work here or live here and work in Lehigh or vice versa. If you bring quality jobs to Provo, then people are going to hopefully want to come to Provo, work in Provo, spend their money in Provo. So there's no guarantees. We feel obligated to provide good jobs in Provo, and this is a good employer.
We've also received funding from state. I remember Governor Herbert being very excited
to announce that Duncan was going to be coming to Provo. We've received state funding through the legislature and county funding for this. And so this is not a Provo project. This is a statewide project, actually.
I should also comment, I believe, this is a private venture, and we'll be collecting property taxes on the property that will be used in Provo and spent in Provo. We do have people that live elsewhere in the county, maybe even elsewhere along the Wasatch Front, that commute into Provo for their jobs, and I think we benefit from our role as the business center for the county. But we also have Provo residents who live here and travel to other cities to work. And I'm one of those residents that work elsewhere. And I do think that the whole area benefits from good job opportunities. And I'm grateful to live in a free society where we can live in one city and work in another. And I do think we overall benefit from that. So thank you for the discussion. Any other thoughts? Okay, I will call for a vote. Since we read two in, just to be clear, I call for a vote on an implied motion on a resolution appropriating. Let me try that again. Call for a vote on the implied motion on a resolution approving and authorizing a Section 108 loan transaction for $2.5 million for infrastructure improvements to fulfill obligations related to the expansion of Duncan Aviation. All in favor? It's unanimous. And now I will call for a vote on the implied motion on a resolution approving the transfer of $2.5 million in Section 108 loan proceeds from the CDBG fund to the airport fund for municipal infrastructure related to the expansion of Duncan Aviation. All in favor? And that is also unanimous. Thank you. If there is no objection, we will now recess as the Municipal Council of Provo and reconvene as the Redevelopment Agency of Provo by unanimous consent.
Okay. Item 14, a public hearing on a resolution approving and adopting the project area plan for the medical school community reinvestment project area. And that'll be presented by David Walter.
Chair Knecht, members of the agency board, good evening. The item before you tonight and the next one are related. They are the redevelopment plan and the redevelopment budget for the proposed medical school project area. For the benefit of everyone, a while back when we transferred the property, the 3 holes at the golf course for the construction of a new medical school, we had agreed to use our best efforts to create a redevelopment project area. And subsequent to that, we have looked at, in scaling in subsequent meetings, we have scaled the project back to encompass only the 8 acres that are going to be housing that'll be adjacent to the medical school. The item before you tonight is the adoption of the redevelopment plan, the proposed redevelopment plan, and the proposed budget for that. It's important to note that the tax increment that would be generated by this project area will be used to help pay for some enhancements at the golf course in addition to the relocation of the 3 holes. None of the money that's being proposed to be created through this process will be going to reimburse the developer of the housing portion of the medical school project for the purchase of the property or the relocation of the acquisition of the holes. We are proposing that through this process, through the budget that's been put together for this, that we would use roughly $2.3 million over a 6-year period to reimburse the Parks and Rec Department for the enhancements that they are making to the golf course through the relocation process. You may remember that when the project was approved for the golf course relocation, that there were some enhancements that were anticipated by the Parks and Rec Department. They went ahead and in order to get a better overall cost for the city, because then no one would have to mobilize twice in order for the construction. They wrapped these enhancements in, and there was an interfund loan that was made to cover this. And so now we're proposing to use tax increment from the tax increment generated by the construction of the housing component here to help to repay back that loan. That money would go for the first roughly 5.5 years, and then the balance of the 12-year period money would go to the developer to help pay for some of the sewer infrastructure costs that they have to do in order to develop this project. The plan is set to go for 12 years. It would go, there's currently a base year on the project. So everyone that's a taxing entity, including the city, is going to get all the taxes that we currently are entitled to through this process. And for the 12-year period that the plan is in place, that they would then defer a portion of those taxes until the end of the 12-year period. We've met with the school board and with the county commission and discussed this with them, and we're bringing this item before you now for your consideration and adoption. I should also note that this item has been noticed as a public hearing and has been put into the newspaper. A copy of the plan has been available at the city recorder's office, as well as the front desk of the Development Services Department. It was noticed in the newspaper, and staff is available for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. Questions? Mr. Van Buren,
Just one clarification, David, on,
sir.
Let's see, it's 2.6 on the resolution.
So yes.
It states to take any or all additional steps which may be appropriate or necessary to promote or further the aim of improving the project area. Then parentheses, it says, and indirectly of surrounding areas. I'd just like to have a little more clarification why that was put in and what that might refer to.
Gives us the flexibility to make additional improvements through benefit finding resolutions. If there needs to be some additional projects. I'm going to defer to our outside redevelopment counsel, Mr. Adam Long of the firm Smith Hart Dickinson.
Sorry, I'm losing my voice. Yeah, the resolution you see before you for the project area plan hits a number of statutory points. The relevant statute has a number of things that this resolution has to say. So that is not designed to be anything specific for this project area, but simply to make sure this resolution covers anything we might need to be doing. So don't read anything into that other than allowing the agency, other than not limiting the agency's flexibility.
And the harm in limiting the agency's flexibility to just the plan area instead of surrounding areas?
Well, in this case in particular, a big part of what the agency is going to be doing is actually outside of the project area making golf course improvements. So in particular for this one, that's relevant. The project area itself is just a parcel where the I guess, yeah, the 8-acre housing parcel. I was going to say the medical school housing, but that's not quite right. The project area itself is just that 8-acre parcel where the housing will be developed. So in this case, the agency anticipates, as Mr. Walter explained, spending $2 million and change improving areas that are technically outside of the project area.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Walter? Or I don't see any, so we ought to open this up to the public, being this allows for a public hearing. Please feel free to come forward and ask any questions.
This is really the reason I'm here. I'm Sam Ullman, Provo. Is the medical school have a representative here today? My wife always showed up for the birth of my children every single time. Just thought I'd mention that this is their baby. Are we going to subsidize through taxpayer money every housing project in Provo, or is this the only one? Oh, and there are others, yes. It seems like this is an interesting thing, and we need to recognize this is Provo's money. We could be building a Provo Center next door with this tax money, and maybe the school will go on. But this is a thing that I'm wondering about, is what's the total liability Provo has right now in taxes that is not being paid because we've offered it to somebody for development. I don't know what that is. Last meeting that I was to about that was on mill race, and it was totaled up to 14 million bucks. Now, in my house, that's a lot of money. But I don't know how much that is in terms of Provo's obligation. There's a lot of money being handed back to developers. The biggest problem developers have for housing is finding a place to build it. It isn't finance. The money's out there. But at any rate, and I'm not arguing, it's not a lot of money here compared to some of the other projects. But we're coming up on a renewal of the mall down here, tax increment financing. It's been going on over 20 years. I don't know how much money that's taken out of our resource, but I just got my tax bill, and it doubled for the county. I don't know what the rest of the taxes are going to be, but I know it's going up. At any rate, I think we really need to recognize that this is real money, and unless there's a real return on it, we don't put it in that bank. And I don't know where it's going to go, but thank you for your help.
Is there any other comment from the public? Seeing none, we will bring this back to the council for any discussion. Dave.
Mr. Chair. Do we know, just generally, the question I think would answer, the number that would answer Mr. Oman's question, I think, would be what was the TIF receipts received by the RDA last fiscal year?
I inadvertently grabbed the report, the 2018 report, not the 2019 report. But we received for all of the project areas, or just?
Yes, for all of those, and understanding that this is not just, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So we received $645,000 for project area number 4, which is the mall. For the South University Avenue, we received $154,000. For the financial center, which is in the downtown where the Zions Bank building is, we received $208,000. For Mountain Vista, we received $88,000. And then there was an additional project area that was put in place for the mall. That was another $87,000. The South University was $18,000. The downtown was $486,000. So.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? Oh. Go ahead, Gary.
I'm just curious about those numbers represent what we received in TIF
Correct.
as a city.
Correct.
And not necessarily where it's been going to this. That's.
So for project area number 4, so the base year was $17 million. In 2018, the valuation was $106 million. And so the mall and all the entities within the project area pay their taxes. So, and then a portion of it was rebated back. So that's the 620. That was the increment that we received based on the differential between the 106 million and the base year valuation of 17 million.
And then as those areas expire, those TIF areas expire, then we, for example, the last one you mentioned, 17 million, we get 17 million. So it's kind of an investment.
Yes, so we are foregoing some of the taxes for a time. And so, for example, Mountain Vista, the Mountain Vista project area, that actually sunsets in 2021, so not next year, but the year after. Kind of important to note that this one has a base year valuation of 0. So this was the very contaminated property that the city worked with, the former Ironton plant. Mr. Holmes has been working for quite, I think one time he said his entire span or tenure here in Provo, he's been working to get this cleaned up and moved. And so when the city acquired it, when we put the project area in place, worked with the school district, worked with the county to make that happen, we were getting no taxes from it. So now it currently has a valuation of $30 million. We have roughly probably 400 to 500 jobs that have been created as a result of the businesses that are in there. We have Elevate, Action Target. Chris McKay has done several speculative developments, and he's filled those up now. So he's got one project that is completely filled up, his building is. And so it's been a return of a fairly blighted property to a productive use that benefits the residents, the community, the school district, and the county.
So I'm thinking our investment's paying off.
In this particular case, yes.
In that particular case.
Yes.
So follow-up question. So if you have receipts coming in, and you already listed those, that's the total amount of tax increment, but one could argue that that's considering all entities. That's what was going to be paid to the school district, to us, to the county, and our portion of that is, I'm guessing, somewhere around 20 to 25%.
Maybe lower than that.
Maybe lower than that, yeah. So you have to know what the numbers are really telling you, and this is if for whatever reason the developer didn't want to buy into Mountain Vista Business Park, if we didn't offer them terms that were attractive, then it would just sit there like it did for the last 50 years. And I understand your comments are appreciated, Sam. And we keep having this discussion about how often, how much, when do we need to help somebody, whether it be a business or an apartment house or whatever project it is. And part of what I see is redevelopment is a lot harder than greenfield development, whether it's this contaminated property in South Provo or redeveloping the middle of town where you have to buy property and tear it down and start over. There are challenges, and sometimes things just don't happen without a little help. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think there are certain circumstances where redevelopment is a necessary and valuable tool for any city to have, particularly cities that have a developed urban core that has, in some cases, has gone a long while without any significant reinvestment. Now, Provo's been fortunate that we've had some significant reinvestment that took place that we can kind of springboard off of some of that. And we've seen some of that happening on Center Street. We continue to see some of that on Center Street. We've had conversations with other property owners along Center Street who are looking to develop their property, or I should say redevelop their property, and they're interested in what the city's doing. The fact that we have made a commitment to the downtown with putting in the new city center facilities. I think that is a reflective of our commitment to the downtown and to what's happening. And I think, redevelopment has a tool. It certainly is valuable. It's not worth it in every case, but in certain circumstances, it does make sense. The item tonight is to help us to take that tool and use it to help get some of these enhancements at the golf course that are going to be beneficial to the city in general, to the county, to all the residents that currently use it, to the school district, and the fact that they have golf teams that practice at the course. Some of the enhancements that are going to be made are going to be benefiting them. The course, the relocation of the 3 holes is happening right now. They've got sod, I believe, going in there, and so it's an opportunity for us to reinvest in the community.
Yes, Dave.
I was wondering, Mr. Chair, if you feel, or if Mr. Walters feels that the vote on this could be characterized as following through on a commitment that we've already made. I mean, it feels like the medical school project is a ways down the road. So, what's your feeling on that?
If I could, so in reference, the city did agree to use its best efforts. It's not. It wasn't a firm, binding commitment that we would create a project area for this. But, since the time that the real estate purchase agreement was transacted and the property was transferred, we have scaled back significantly the size of the proposed redevelopment project area that would happen here. So, but there is a sense that we did commit to use our best efforts to create a project area, and we have tried to do so.
Thank you. George.
David, isn't tax increment usually associated with risk? In other words, a developer takes the risk that the development is going to be successful and pay taxes, which they get a portion back, sometimes a large portion for a period of time. But it's to lower the risk factor. If there was no risk involved, I don't think we would probably be anxious to help. But most cases that I've seen, we do well in the long run and in the short run because we go from zero tax base or a much smaller tax base or a larger tax base, giving part of it back, and then in the long term, keeping all of it. So, is that the case? Is that the philosophy?
That's one of the reasonings behind redevelopment. It's an opportunity for us to help incentivize and make some things happen. There are certain things that may not have happened unless a city or a county made an effort to make that happen. I think if you look at the mall had some significant infrastructure hurdles that they had to overcome, and that was the main reason for creating the project area that would encompass the mall as it is today. And granted, the mall is perhaps not where we would like it to be today, but I mean, retail in general throughout the country is struggling. So I don't think it's inappropriate to think that we wouldn't struggle. But the mall has delivered on that investment. We've had the benefit of having the jobs there. We've had the benefit of having the sales tax being generated there. And so it's been an asset to the community for as long as it's been available. And I think it still continues to be an asset, even though it's one that, may not be, it's certainly not at the taxable value that it was, say, in 2008 and 2007, but, we know kind of what happened during that time frame.
In all cases, as far as I understand, as far as I've been aware of, these are not taxpayer dollars that existed before the new taxpayer dollars. We're not taking old dollars and giving them away. We're giving new dollars and keeping a portion of it and giving a portion of it in the hope that it will benefit the community in general and also the tax base over a period of time.
Correct. So when a project area is adopted, there is what they call a base year valuation, which is the value of the property as it currently exists on the assessor's tax rolls. The one kind of unique situation in here is that it's the Mountain Vista project area. That had a zero base year simply because it was owned by the city and we were working to clean it up. This project area tonight has a base year as it's currently on the tax rolls. Everybody will get the taxes that they're currently entitled to get: the school district, the county, the water conservancy district, the city. Everyone will get the taxes that they are currently receiving for the life of the project area. There will be a 12-year period where they will give up a portion of the increase in the value of the taxes and that will go to help pay for in this case, for the enhancements and for some sewer improvements that the medical school developers as well as the housing developers are going to have to pay. There's some significant sewer improvements. They have to redo a sewer lift station. So there are some costs that they have to do to make this happen. But at the end of the 12-year period, everybody will get their taxes based on the new valuation. And in the case of the school, that would be a for-profit medical school. I believe they're estimating $150 million. It's important to note that none of that is in this project area. All of that will be subject to the regular taxes and the regular tax split between the taxing entities. We're only asking for a portion of the taxes that will be generated by the construction of the housing component here tonight.
Okay, Dave Harding, you're writing notes. Do you have a comment?
Certainly. I think we're talking, it seems that we're talking on two levels here, which I think is very appropriate. We're talking about tax increment incentives generally, as well as the projects that is before us tonight. I think TIF is a very powerful and important tool. Though I sometimes speak against it in certain applications, I think overall, I think it is an important tool that I'm glad that we have in our toolbox. When we talk about Mountain Vista, we talk about blight. We talk about an area that really would not redevelop on its own, and this is a tool that allowed us to do all the things that you talked about. And I'm glad that we had the tool. I'm glad that it was applied there, and I'm grateful for the work of Mr. Holmes and many others that over the years have really turned Mountain Vista into a great asset for the city. I do sometimes worry that we may use this tool not necessarily to fight blight and to spur redevelopment. And so I just think we have to be very careful. I don't necessarily see this tool, if not used in the way that I described, could be diverting money that would be there if the project were to go forward, or if a similar project were to go forward. The money would be there and would be flowing into our general fund rather than being redirected back to the developers. So that we just have to be very very careful, and we need to be responsible with our taxpayer dollars. And so when I look at this specific project, it weighs, it's not the right way to say it, but it weighs heavily on me that we made a commitment during these negotiations that we would do our best efforts to create a project area. And I think that we need to follow through with that commitment. And the only question I have, and again, this is just trying to be, to execute my fiducial duty to the public. When we negotiated that, there was one concept, and this was early on, and as details have been filled in as the project has moved forward, it's perfectly understandable. But I believe that the vision for this housing component has changed, and so the question I have that I'm trying to answer for myself is, at the time, as we negotiated, we were negotiating on a whole number of aspects, and we kind of landed where we landed, and I want to be faithful to that. But I wonder if this housing component has changed sufficiently that they are already receiving financial benefits from developing and renting the housing.
I do not know if they are pre-leasing any of the spaces. I can certainly try to find out and report back to the council, and would be happy to do so. You are correct, sir, in that there was some significant change, but part of that has allowed us to really scale back the project area. So instead of being 30 to 35 acres, it's now confined to the 8 acres, and we're no longer including the medical school project.
Okay. And that's good to hear, and I appreciate that, and so that's the balance that I'm doing.
Correct.
And I'm not saying that I'm going to vote against this project and this proposal that's right here. This is what I'm trying to grapple with, and I guess the one last question, I think I pretty much explained kind of what I'm weighing personally on this. The one question I have is, sometimes I get lost in all of the various steps that we have. So like with the other project that we'll be looking at a little bit later, we're just creating a survey and an area. This is kind of the next step, and I believe there's at least one more step after this where we will actually approve the redirection of the tax money from the city perspective and then also from the RDA for the various ones. If I vote for this tonight, how much of it am I committing? What am I committing to tonight if I vote for this? What exactly? I mean, there's a whole bunch of numbers before us. There's years and figures and things, but what are we actually committing to with tonight's vote?
So you are adopting the redevelopment plan as has been drafted, currently a draft plan. You are authorizing us to take some actions to record some items with the county recorder, to forward copies of the plans on to entities at the state. To authorize us the next steps to make sure that when the additional taxes start to flow off this property, then we will be entitled to receive the portion that we are currently contemplating. And so I think it's kind of important. I mean, I should have mentioned this earlier in the presentation, is that, you know, we're not committing to a guarantee. We're not guaranteeing an amount of property here. We're using our best efforts to get, based on what you, Mr. Developer, have told us that you're putting into the property. This is what we anticipate that it's going to generate over the 12 tax years that the plan would be in effect. And so we're not giving, you know, any access to any other funds that the city may have. Certainly not the general fund, certainly not any of the other wastewater funds, sewer funds, or whatnot. So this tonight, excuse me for a moment. Tonight you would be contemplating adopting the plan. A subsequent item later on in the agenda is the budget associated with that plan. You're directing staff to take those documents and transmit them and begin the process of doing that. And we will be coming back to you in the future for additional items. And I'll let Adam.
Sorry, again, I'm losing my voice. At the risk of oversimplifying my job and Mr. Walter's job, really the basic effect of adopting the project area plan is to create the geographic area in which the agency can exercise its powers. And, you know, there are some follow-up steps, things that are done, but at the end of the day, that's really what the plan is, or what the project area is. It's a specific geographic area where the agency can do its thing, you know, exercise the powers that the city can't. And, you know, in this case, it's worth noting that most of the increment funds generated by this project area are currently anticipated to go toward golf course improvements, not developer reimbursements or infrastructure.
Well,
a significant portion.
I take exception to that.
Yeah, my numbers, I think it's 2.6, 2.3, 2.6 for golf course improvements, and then 5.3 for reimbursement.
I stand corrected. A significant portion, and as we've currently discussed it, the golf course improvements would get funded first, if that's an okay way to put it. And so the adoption of the project area plan allows the agency to move forward, and the project area budget is really the same. The next steps will be negotiating with the tax entities, of which the city is one, for, interlocal agreements, so agreements whereby the tax entities agree to allow the agency to receive some certain amount of the increment generated by this development. And then that basically gets money that otherwise would have been distributed to the tax entities into the agency's coffers. The next step in that is a participation agreement of some sort with the developer that sets out the terms or the conditions the developer has to meet before the agency would make any of these reimbursements that we've discussed. So at least 2 more significant decisions before any funds flow anywhere besides the agency.
Thank you.
There's been a couple things that have been said that I just want to clarify. One was what you just said, that just, and you've been corrected, I understand that, but I wasn't even close. And Mr. Waller, you've talked about, because the housing project is larger, we've been able to scale back the area for the community reinvestment project area, and that is true. It seems like to me, when we first were doing the negotiation with Wasatch Medical, that the area was going to be used, and the funds generated by this area was to be used to reimburse for the purchase price that Wasatch had to do to Nature Sunshine.
That was discussed, yes.
That's what I understood the agreement was. And now it's being used to provide infrastructure.
Mhm.
Now, the golf course improvements have been thrown on, and we emphasize those a lot, but they're the smaller portion of the area. And the trouble I have sometimes, it seems like we always assume if we do not do this, the developer will leave. And so we can take the stance of saying, well, we're going to get the same amount of tax that we're getting anyway, and at some future point in time, our tax will improve. Well, I just think we do that too quickly, and think sometimes we can say no, and they're going to still come. Is Provo not a positive enough destination for them to just come? So I just think we just say yes too quickly. And the last thing I want to bring up is Mr. Stewart mentioned that one of the reasons for a TIF is to eliminate risk to the developer. And
Not eliminate, to lessen.
okay, lessen the risk. And I really don't, and I've never seen that in study of TIFs that I don't think that should be, the profit is what eliminates the risk. They can't go on a project and say, if we get the TIF, then the risk is gone or mostly gone away. Developers do this to make a profit.
Right.
And if we feel that we have to do a TIF so that it eliminates their risk or a lot of their risk to make a profit, I just don't think that's proper thinking. I don't think that should be part of it.
Let me respond first, George. Dave, I've heard, or in my thinking, we've talked about the TIF where it's performance-based.
Correct.
Now, I'm not sure.
7.1. I don't know what the end up kind of did. Seems like it was right.
When it comes to risk, I don't know that we're shouldering or lessening the risk. That's a new discussion for me. What I focus on is the risk is still on the developer, and if he doesn't perform, if his project fails, then he doesn't get any of the benefits of the TIF because he has to succeed in order for the TIF to pay him back, right?
Yes, so the developer would have to pay taxes on the project in order to get any portion of the tax increment. So it would have to be on the project would have to be up and finished and completed, and then paying taxes in order for us to get any of the tax increment back. We could then, use for other purposes. I think in this case, when we did, there have been several iterations of the proposed development and the proposed project area that would be here at the golf course. One initial factor was the cost of acquiring the Nature Sunshine piece. And so subsequent to that, we were looking at the whole medical golf course project as a project area that would include the 8 acres on the Nature Sunshine piece as well. I think at one time we didn't even propose putting that in the project area. It's strictly going to be the 21 acres that were the 3 former holes that were relocated. But in subsequent discussions and trying to craft the project to make it work for everybody involved, we decided that it would be better to go ahead with the increase that they had put into the value of the project, the number of housing units that are being proposed for the 8 acres, that we didn't need to include at that time, or at this time, we don't need to include the medical school development for that. And then that was, that now is going to go back on the tax rolls where it currently hasn't been, similar to Mountain Vista. And then once it's developed, every taxing entity will get their normal allotment of the taxes based on that value.
Okay.
So there have been some significant changes through this process as we've discussed this. After the real estate purchase agreement was done, there's been a development agreement, there's now an improvement agreement. And so this is the accompanying pieces for the redevelopment project area that need to be put into place to make that happen.
George?
I believe in free markets. I believe also that there's a risk involved, a level of risk involved in every development, every business venture. My understanding of a TIF is to take that risk down to the point that a developer is willing to go ahead where he might not be willing to go ahead otherwise. We don't know that for sure. It's a judgment call that we rely on staff to recommend to us whether we should do this or not. I would be the last one to eliminate risk. There's no way you can be a developer or a business person and not take a risk, but the risk might be too great that you won't go ahead with the project. But when the risk is lessened by a TIF, then you might be willing to go ahead. We don't know for sure, never have. It's always been a subject for discussion, whether the project will go ahead with or without the TIF. I personally rely on staff to evaluate that. I then have to make a judgment whether I feel like they do that we should go ahead. And I understand that staff is recommending we go ahead with this one. So I'm assuming it's to lessen the risk to the point that the project will go ahead.
So just to follow up on that, George, to me, when a developer looks at a project, it has to pencil, and this helps it pencil. But as for risk, they're going to build, in this case, apartments, and he still has to go out and find somebody to rent those. And nobody knows the future. Like the stock market or a downturn in the economy, another 2008, whatever. And worst case, he doesn't rent them all. And then he's got a problem. That's his risk. But just to get the thing built, you have to have a certain amount of capital, cover the expenses. But even once it's built, there's still risk. And we're not backstopping his risk on renting all those out, right? Right,
No.
Dave?
No.
It's a great thing about a TIF. It requires that the person perform for them to get any benefit at all. We don't take a risk. We take the benefit if they take the risk and are successful.
Okay, I appreciate the discussion. Wish there was more audience here to hear it. We appreciate those that have come and stayed. Let's see, we've already had the comment, so I think we're ready to vote if we've had enough discussion.
Just one more question. How much public comment have we gotten? Did we get anything back after it's been out for some period of time? And were those comments incorporated in
I
anything?
am not aware of any comments that we received at the Development Services counter, and I don't believe that we had any at the Recorder's office as well.
Thank you.
See how interested the public is by how many people are here.
If Mr. Holmes has a comment, I'd love to hear from him.
At the risk of talking some of you out of this, let's just say the developer's going to make gobs of money and just put that on the table and accept that as a fact. And now that they're going to get a little bit more from the city. Provo City right now, if you haven't noticed, is not winning a lot of battles on being the premier place. We're kind of losing in some areas to lead behind other communities. And this is an opportunity to, yeah, would they come if we weren't doing this? It's possible. I don't know what their calculus is on whether they come to Provo or not. But Provo wants to maintain its relevance. And I get we don't want to give away the farm. That's really important that we don't give it all away. But there are times when projects need inducements, and I know it seems lately, but my gosh, when does it end? Well, it ends when we can say that we're so good that we don't have to induce anybody. And frankly, it'd be awesome if we didn't have to induce anybody to come to Provo because the economics worked, the market was there, and a whole host of other things that why to come to Provo. But in a time that we need to maintain our relevance with our quality of life and everything else that we're trying to do, having a medical school, I know there's a couple down on the agenda for the next one for the mix. And yes, the mall will be back. All these projects will help maintain our relevance going forward in the future. And if we don't, that's okay. It's not illegal or immoral to say no. It isn't. But it's also a conscious decision of saying, okay, maybe we passed on that one and it didn't happen in Provo. And if you're okay with, and I'm not saying it's a do or die, but if you're okay with saying, no, we're just not going to do it, and just roll the dice and see if they do it or not, that's not illegal or immoral. Again, I know it's a tough decision, and I'm not up there in your position that was voted into office to make these challenging decisions. They are, there's no doubt. It's very challenging, and you have to face constituents. Why did you give this away or that? Well, my answer would be because we're trying to continue to develop our community when we are getting piecemeal taken apart by other communities who would love to have these things, and they seem to be okay with this. And again, it's a game that I wish we didn't have to play, but it's some of the tools that we have been given, which are not illegal or immoral either, but they are set up by law and state law, and the city has a redevelopment. That would just be my 2 cents, is that just, yeah, they're going to make a lot of money. I hope they do. In fact, the only way they're going to get paid back is if they do make a lot of money because of the valuation of what they put into the ground. And that's just how it works. And it's part of the economic environment in which we're in, and we can't take a principled stand and say, heck no, we're not going to do it like that. But then we need to face the consequence if for some reason they say, yeah, we're not coming to Provo because we got the same deal down the street and they were willing to play. It's just kind of a calculated risk, and that's all that it is. Again, it's not illegal or immoral, it's just a decision, but it is a decision. It does have consequences on either side of that, and that's what that's it.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. I'm glad that you said that and we had the opportunity to hear that. I do, and I think that Provo is a wonderful place to do business. I hope people can come here and make gobs of money. As we develop additional places, those additional developments place additional demands on our services, and so we need to provide police service out to a new medical school, and we need to provide water and sewer and roads, and as we all know that these developments don't pay for themselves. And so my difficulty is if they're going to develop the project anyway, I think this is a great tool for redevelopment, fighting blight in areas that won't redevelop. But if the project is going through anyways, and if they're making gobs of money, then if we put a TIF on top of that, if that's the circumstance, and that's one of the big questions we have to grapple with, but if that's the circumstance that the project would go forward with or without the TIF, then if we do the TIF, to me that is giving away tax money that would be flowing into our general fund out of which we would pay for these services. And I will be voting for this. I appreciate the comments that have been made about the scaling back as this has morphed, and we felt like this could be scaled back. And so I do think our redevelopment agency is doing their best to, to hit the mark on these. And we did negotiate this, and we agreed to it earlier, and I think we need to follow through with that. And so I'm actually feeling pretty comfortable with the work that the RDA has done to try to fulfill our obligations, our commitments that we made previously, and accommodating or adjusting to the changes that have been made. I will be voting for this, but just again, we're talking about this from kind of a philosophical point of view that I think it's great when people come in and can make gobs of money providing, doing good business in Provo. I think that's wonderful. But if at the same time we're also redirecting the money that they're paying in property taxes back to them, I think that is, problematic. And I think that's what we need to just guard against when we're approving these things, making sure that it's kind of the former, not the latter.
Okay, I appreciate all the comments and questions and staff's presentations. If we are done with our discussions and deliberations, then I would ask us to vote on the implied motion. All those in favor? And all those opposed? All in favor except Kay Van Buren. We appreciate your participation. And item 15 is before us. A public hearing on a resolution approving and adopting the Community Reinvestment Project Area budget for the Medical School Community Reinvestment Project Area, presented by David Walter.
Recognize members of the agency board. Thank you. This item is related to the previous item. So this is the budget that's associated with the redevelopment plan. Same as the plan, told us a geographic area that we're going to be operating in. This is how we're proposing to use the funds that would be generated through this redevelopment project area. And so you can see that there, we've made some guesses here based on some conversations that we've had. You can see the base year value is in place, the capital investment, and so there is a line item in each one of those colored blocks that talks about a housing allocation. It's important to note that through the creation of this process, because it is a new redevelopment project area, there are 10% of the tax increment that's generated has to be set aside for purposes of housing under state law. And so as we're going through this, there will be a housing fund that will be created, and the city of, or the redevelopment agency will be getting money that would be dedicated for providing housing for low to moderate income individuals and families as a result of this project. So we've made our best guess as to what that would be. The school district has a block, the city has a block, the county has a block, the water district has a block. In each one of those blocks, there is a housing allocation. So the budget. Am I on? I don't know. Now it's on. So, do you want me to start over? Okay. So there will be housing funds created. We will create a housing fund to hold those, and then there will be opportunities for the agency to come back and present proposals to you to be using those funds, not only in the project area, but adjacent to the project area and probably throughout the city. We'll make benefit finding resolutions that will allow us to take the housing increment and do other things throughout the city. So again, as the redevelopment plan was saying geographically, this is where it's going to be. The budget's saying this is what our fiscal idea is going to be, creating the money and where the money's going to go throughout the 12-year process. So that concludes my portion of the presentation, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
85% is what I see for the city's portion. Is that because of the 10% puts us at 95, or is the 10%? So the 10% is after. So we're really committing to 85, which is lower than we have committed in past projects.
Yes.
Okay.
Based on conversations we've had.
Wonderful.
And worth noting, right now
You're not committing to any level at all.
Right.
This is just staff's best guess based on conversations that we've had with other entities, including the school district and the city council. So,
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, if there are no further questions, we will open this up to the public. You are welcome to come forward and ask any questions. Okay, seeing no one with any questions, we will bring this back to the council. And Dave.
Just would like to say ditto.
Ditto? Okay. All right. I think we're ready to vote on the implied motion for item 15. All in favor? And all opposed? All in favor except K. Van Buren. Opposed? We'll move now to item 16, a resolution designating a survey area authorizing the preparation of a draft community reinvestment project area plan and budget related to the MIX project and authorizing and directing all necessary actions.
So, good evening again. So this item before you is creating a survey area for the former Plumtree Plaza development, which has been bought by Westport Capital, and they are working through the process. You may remember that this has been before you before, and based on some changes that have happened within the development plan, and the proposed tax increment use, that we felt it was appropriate to bring it back before you and sort of restart the process and go back to step one. And that is this item tonight. So what we are doing tonight is to authorize staff to prepare a plan and budget similar to what we just did for the medical school project area and bring that back to you. It's important to note that one of the reasons the change happened is that the developer removed a couple of significant blocks of value from their project, specifically 300,000 square feet of Class A office, as well as 2 structured parking decks. They anticipate still doing the hotel component, the commercial component, and doing doing the residential component. They would increase the residential component. The development agreement requires them to pay either an in lieu payment, either to provide some low and moderate income housing on the project, or make an in lieu payment to the city in order for that to happen. They are facing some significant sewer issues as well. They're sort of at the end of the line. They're at the other end of the line as opposed to where the medical school was, in terms of where the sewer is. And so the request now has really been scaled back if this does go forward, it would be for 5 years or $1.5 million, whichever comes first. And so that's how the staff will craft the plan and the budget and bring it back to you at a later date for consideration and potential adoption. So that is my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I apologize to my fellow councilors. So as you mentioned, office components going away, the 2 parking structures are going away. Generally, the rest of the components are roughly the same as where they were before?
Roughly. Still the retail component, still the 124-room hotel. Residential will be increased some. I think the differential is 200 units. They're going to go from 300 to 500. But they're still going to keep the hotel, and they're still going to keep about 85 to 88,000 square feet of new commercial/retail space.
It seemed like the last time we were discussing this, that 200, the increase in 200 housing units was already being discussed last time we we met on this. Is that correct, or is this an additional 200?
No, this was the same 200.
Same
So
200.
we just brought it back to you to restart the process because, one, there was a significant change in the value based on taking 300,000 square feet of Class A office space out, not to mention the 2 parking decks. But there's also a significant reduction in the ask. So it's $1.5 million for sewer improvements, or 5 years, whichever comes first.
Okay.
And we terminate the project.
So I guess my question is, with the loss of that office and parking decks, I guess I was just hopeful that perhaps at a later phase they may be able to put some of that back in. It may not be all of it, maybe something else. So my question is, with that space, once those components were gone, did things just get less dense, or is it the 200 units are going to take up that space, or will there still be space, like instead of having parking garage, now they have more surface parking?
They'll have surface parking, correct.
In the future, they could build structured parking and open up space.
Correct. In the future, they could redevelop the project again and add either take the not the residential, but potentially the commercial space, put that on a ground floor, and then stack office up above it, and then possibly add more structured parking.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we'd like to open this up to the public for any questions or comments. Seeing none from the public, we will bring this back to the council for any further discussion, if there is any. Dave?
I just want to say ditto. The comments, I think, probably for all of us that we said earlier apply to this one. And let me just thank Mr. Walter for your work on this. I feel like you are listening carefully to, and it's hard to listen to 7 people all at the same time, but I do feel like you're hearing what we're saying. I appreciate your work with them, and the scaling back of the ask. That's not gone unnoticed. So thank you for that.
Great. Well, let's vote on the implied motion. All in favor? And the voting is unanimous. If there's no objection, we will now adjourn the Redevelopment Agency of Provo and reconvene as the Municipal Council of Provo by unanimous consent.
Thank you, Chair Knecht. The final item on today's agenda is an implied motion on I guess it's a public hearing on an implied motion on an ordinance adopting the Community Reinvestment Project Area Plan for the Medical School Community Reinvestment Project Area. And this will also be presented by Mr. David Walter.
Mm-hmm.
Chair Harding, members of the City Council, good evening. So part of the requirements under the state of Utah's code concerning redevelopment agencies is that the legislative body for a community has to adopt the project area by ordinance. And you can see some of the specific citations that are here. And so this item, you're saying that we've had the public hearing, we've taken the comment, and now we're adopting by ordinance the project area and moving ahead with that. So it's pretty much my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions you might have.
Any questions? Any questions for Mr. Walter? Yeah, please.
Dave, there's one I should have asked earlier.
Yes, sir.
There was the Nature Sunshine property, and then part of our deal was also there's a sliver, I think 1.9 acres that we were supposed to, is that part of this area, or is it just the Nature Sunshine property that's part of the area?
I think I know that there have been some discussions with the
Is it Bureau of Reclamation?
Not Reclamation. No. I want to say the Corps of Engineers. I believe that's the entity that we have to discuss, and so there have been some conflicting documentation in their records about whether or not this could or could not be a part of it. So I think it's pretty much just, I think we anticipated that it might be resolved by this, and so the little triangular piece kind of to square off the project area is included. But I'd have to take a look at the legal description to verify that, so. So I think the piece that Mr. Van Buren's talking about would kind of come down like this. So this is the nature sunshine piece in and of itself. So,
And the plan right now is just what we see there?
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we will open up a public hearing for this item. If anyone from the community would like to speak to it. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Is there any council discussion on this? Seeing none, other than let me just, again, the comments previously I think apply to this as well. With no other discussion, I will call for a vote on the implied motion on the ordinance adopting the Community Reinvestment Project Area Plan for the Medical School Community Reinvestment Project Area. All in favor? Those opposed? And that's all in favor except for Mr. K. Van Buren, who is opposed. And with...
At the risk of being out of order here, just one final comment. You know, I stand in front of a lot of councils and commissions, and the debate here is exactly the type of things and questions that you should be asking about. You know, what is the risk? What are we gaining? Is it worth spending the public's money? Will it happen without our intervention? So, you know, my compliments to you as both council members and agency board members. These are hard decisions. Those are exactly the questions you should be asking. I appreciate you having me here tonight.
Okay, thank you. Unless there's any other spontaneous comments from the public, we will now adjourn by unanimous consent.
Okay, I'm glad you went out with a solo.
Three.